absolutely from the soul. It's from the heart. It's from, I think it's music that represents real life. I've sometimes described it as music with dirt under its fingernails. You know, it's music with calluses. It's music with that's being made by somebody who's living the moment.
In 1775, immigration to the flat prairies and swamps of the Louisiana Territory by a group of French-speaking immigrants from Nova Scotia, the Acadians, shaped a society rich in musical, cultural, and culinary traditions. This is Acadiana, 8 parishes in south-central Louisiana, Cajun country, flat farming communities born from hard work, luck, hard luck, and devotion. A part of Louisiana visited by a comparative few and understood by considerably fewer. We'll come back here later for a closer look at this unique culture. New Orleans is Louisiana's most popular and significant city. The modern skyscrapers loom in stark contrast to New Orleans' first community. The French Quarter, a fortified rectangle built in the 1700s, a living museum in modern New Orleans. The best way to get an introduction, one of the many horse-drawn carriages.
Welcome to New Orleans. We're just leaving Jackson Square. That's the heart of the city, named for Major General Andrew Jackson. He was the 7th President of the United States and a hero at the Battle of New Orleans, and a good friend of mine, because his face is on the $20 bill. Now, where we are right now, we're a few feet below sea level. The river just to the left of us sits 15 feet above sea level. And it's like we're sitting here at the bottom of a giant gumbo bowl. And the only reason we're not swimming right now is because of 131 miles of natural and man-made levees. Also, 22 pumping stations keep the water pumped out continuously because it doesn't drain naturally here. Just to the left of us here is the Toulouse Street Wharf. That's where you can usually find the Natchez boat. Now, the Natchez is the only steamboat running in the area at this time. What we have here now is the 9th Natchez. The 6th is the famous boat that raced against the Robert E. Lee back in 1870. Went from here to St. Louis in about 3.5 days. Now, up ahead, you can see a statue of our city's founder. He was a French-Canadian named Bienville, and he founded the city in 1718. Now, coming up on the left is the New Orleans School of Cooking.
So the history of the city begins in 1718 with French-Canadian men. After they get little huts built and such, they begin to think of other pursuits, namely women. And there were no European women here. Bienville, I'm sure, was concerned about having a pure European gene pool. So he writes back to the French government and says, send me wives for my French Canadians. They're chasing after the Indians into the woods. The French, and this is what I'm telling you is true, I just make these things sound preposterous, okay? The French government empties a house of correction and sends 90 loose women over here under the control of 4 nuns and a midwife, and that's our gene pool. So when you see all this stuff you see in the streets, what do you expect? The roots ain't too great, you know?
When you have Ann Leonard as an instructor, you get more than just a cooking lesson and some great food.
You don't have people to work, you know? It's a unique city, no doubt about that. It's been around since 1718, founded by French-Canadian men, and stayed French from 1718 until 1762. Then we were given to the Spanish. The Spanish at that time getting here, because everything happens late in New Orleans. We don't rush here. Our philosophy is you rush, you sweat. Obviously, I'm sweating. And the Spanish come. They turn out to be incredible administrators. Then 2 fires during the time they're here and devastate the whole city, so the city's rebuilt. Then in 1800, we're given back to the French again, and then in 1803, sold down the river to the United States of America. Big shock to the Creoles. So those are the native peoples, well, not natives, but people born here or descendants of people born in the colony. You remember your history, or that history, in school there was a song, In 1814, we took a little trip, la la la, down the mighty Mississippi. Anyway, it's the war against England, and it comes to us late. Andrew Jackson comes down here the late 1814, finds out that these British are coming in tremendous numbers, seasoned troops, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. So Andrew Jackson goes to the governor, because New Orleans was the capital at the time, and says, we've got a serious problem here. We don't have enough flint, much less men, to fight these British. And the governor thinks about it, and he said, you know, maybe you better go to Walmart for your supplies. And Walmart was a privateer named Jean Lafitte, okay? So they go across the river way down further there and make a deal with Jean Lafitte, and we beat the pants off the Brits. And after that, everything starts falling in place. And we go through a period of incredible growth and wealth, a period we call La Belle Epoque, where you couldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole. 58% of the buildings in the French Quarter are built during those boom years. The Garden District develops during that period of time. Then in 1861, the War of Northern Aggression, which of course you all would call the Civil War. We started, of course, but it comes to us a little pretty much on time. The Yankees occupy us in 1862, and they stay here the whole time. They love us. They don't want to leave. And we don't say au revoir until 1877, the longest former Confederate state to be occupied. Why? Because of that river. As the 20th century approaches, cities much older than New Orleans, because God knows 1718 isn't as old as some places, are tearing down their oldest sections like our French Quarter. There were plans to do it for us, but we were too broke to do it. So indirectly, I always say we owe the French Quarter to the Yankees because they left us in such desperate straits and so broke and so politically corrupt, which we still have unique politics today. And we still have our French Quarter. They don't have their old areas. And that's the history of the city.
That's where the trench began 60 years ago.
There you go. Coming up here on the left at the green doorway there, that's where the Great Fire of 1788 started. Burned 80% of the city to the ground. About 850 buildings were lost at that time. And that's why the architecture that you see here now in the French Quarter, it's not French, it's mostly Spanish, because the fire happened when the Spanish were in power. Now you can see the St. Louis Cathedral is right up ahead. Ordinarily, the church would have rung its bells in the case of a fire, and the people would have gotten together with a bucket brigade, save some of the buildings. But because the fire happened on a Good Friday, the church would not ring its bells, and consequently the church itself burned to the ground. Now that's the third church now on that site. That one was built in 1794. Right next door to the church here on the corner is the Cabildo. That was the seat of Spanish government, also where the Louisiana Purchase was signed in 1803. On the left here is La Petite Theater. That's the oldest continuously run theater in the United States. And right next door here, up on the third floor, is where Tennessee Williams lived when he wrote Streetcar Named Desire. In fact, the Desire streetcar ran right up ahead here along Royal Street. Now, people might tell you that Tennessee Williams slept here, Tennessee Williams slept there. Probably all true. I understand he slept just about everywhere in the quarter. Now this is Bourbon Street here. Gets pretty crazy here during Mardi Gras time. They actually grease down these poles so that people don't climb up on the balconies. And right next to Pat O'Brien's is Preservation Hall. That's where you can hear some good Dixieland jazz music. They'll open up about 8 or 9 tonight.
Bourbon Street is a veritable circus at just about any hour during the day. At night, it really starts to jump, about 8 o'clock. New Orleans in the French Quarter is a mecca for tourists, over 3 million each year. A vibrant, exciting, spontaneous city. There's something for everyone, 12 months a year.
Take 'em out. Take 'em out. Take 'em out.
Jackson Square is where buggy tours begin and end. Set up around the square, artists and entertainers, each presenting themselves in unique New Orleans style.
What I'm doing is I'm sort of entertaining with the visual. The Impressionists realize that when you paint, you really are not painting the subject. The subject doesn't exist if there's no light. So they also realize that color doesn't really create anything, and they proved it by simply taking a black and white photograph. So what I do is I imagine light as opposed to a subject. So what I do is I imagine different scenarios, some very intense, some very bright, some soft, some very muted. But when I go to each of those areas, I don't break the rule, I sort of bend it by using many colors in a right value and intensity ranges. So there's a little bit of a method to the madness, so to speak. And jazz is entertaining, and I like to be entertained when I paint. So that's why I paint this type of stuff.
A must stop in the morning, beignets and chicory coffee at the Café du Monde.
We're at the Café du Monde eating beignets.
Very, very good. Carbo loading for the marathon.
That's right.
Carbo load for the marathon.
Café du Monde is the anchor for the French market, the oldest public market in America. It stretches for blocks, a farmers and flea market with everything from feather boas to furniture. In New Orleans, jazz has made some of its most significant advances thanks to pioneers like Louis Armstrong, Sidney Bechet, Buddy Bolden, King Oliver, and Jelly Roll Morton. It's still happening in the 21st century. The evolution of jazz continues at local clubs like the Funky Butt on Rampart Street. Young players like these are developing their own unique style and sophistication as they entertain.
St. Charles streetcar that we are riding on right now dates back to 1835, and it was a horse-drawn car. And then in 1896, they electrified the line. We was the third system in the country to have electric cars. Prior to that, it was all horse-drawn cars. The car that we're riding on right now was built in 1923. The St. Charles car is the oldest continuous operating streetcar line in the world. We started in 1835, and we've been in business ever since. Don't intend getting out. But the cars are all very reliable cars, and with a little care, we keep them running. And it's a beautiful ride down here on St. Charles Avenue. Look, every day you can come down and see something new. I've been running on these cars for almost 50 years, and every day I come down along this way and I find a new house or something that somebody's changed on their houses. It's really interesting to come down through this part of the city.
The St. Charles line passes some of the most beautiful homes in the city. New Orleans is the largest port on the Gulf, second largest in the United States, and fourth largest in the world. Upriver from New Orleans a few miles in Kennerville, now Kenner, Louisiana, the first World Championship heavyweight boxing match was held in 1870. The bare knuckle take-all battle had a $2,500 purse, won by Judd Massey. Across Lake Pontchartrain, in the opposite direction, Honey Island Swamp, one of the least altered, best preserved river swamps in North America. Since 1982, Dr. Paul Wagner and his crew of naturalist guides have been conducting ecological, natural history tours of Honey Island.
But altogether we have over 100 different species of freshwater fish that are found here, and a short boat ride to the mouth and beyond, and you can catch all the saltwater species of fish. And traveling to the right or downstream, the mouth of the river is about maybe 8 miles from here, 8 to 9 miles. Where there the river spills out into the coastal waters, and it goes in directly into the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to turn off the river and go way back in the swamp. Oh, here's a good start. Look at the houseboat there. Look at that big snake right by the chair. A diamondback water snake right by the door. Now, if you want to see a lot of snakes, you go inside that houseboat there. There's plenty of them hibernating in there. You can see the water's not real deep right there where those birds are. They actually are touching the bottom. If you were to get out and walk right there, you would need boots right now, but the water might be about knee deep. We're going to turn off the river into some quiet water, okay, where the water's still, not moving. Where there the water's a little warmer. Now the gray moss you see in the trees is called Spanish moss. The gray color is a natural color. It's living and growing. We're going to see alligators on both sides of the boat. I'm going to turn the boat around so you can see them. Now both of those look like they're a good 7 feet long, so those are average or maybe a little bit above average. 2 of them. The American alligator get 14 to 16 feet, the males. Females 8.5 to 9 feet. I hope that's not one of those jumping snakes. We're going to see some more snakes. Some of them are going to be stretched out on the limbs. On the left over here, you see some camps on what I mentioned before was all state property, except for those camps are. That one stretch of land is owned by one person, who the camp owners lease the land from. The state property begins just beyond those camps. This is the only part of the 35,000 acres where these camps are allowed to be built.
The Creole Nature Trail is a 180-mile roadway it's a loop that goes through southwest Louisiana. It passes through 2 national wildlife refuges and a host of little communities through a couple of parishes, Cameron and Calcasieu Parish. It's a really nice way for folks to see a unique area of the United States. It's an all-American road, which is one of only 20 in the United States. And it's been chosen as an all-American road just for the uniqueness of southwest Louisiana. And we've got coastal marshes, we have unique migratory birds, we have unique coastal species that only live in this area. We have 2 merging flyways for waterfowl flyways, so we get all kinds of different birds. It's really a wonderful wildlife area. What people are really looking for when they come to southwest Louisiana, they'll drive the Creole Nature Trail, show up at Sabine National Wildlife Refuge and say, where can I see an alligator? Number 1 question, where can I see an alligator? People have never seen one in their life, or they've seen them and they're bringing their family and they want to show them one. So we send them to the Wetland Walkway, which is a 1.5 mile walking trail we have here at the refuge. And it takes people through a freshwater marsh. It's an improved sidewalk area with a boardwalk, and there's generally alligators, especially in the spring and the fall where we have nice sunny days. There'll be an alligator or several alligators laying out on higher ground, maybe even up next to the trail. We have birds here year-round. We have a lot of wading birds. We have roseate spoonbills. We have great blue herons, all different species of wading type birds. We'll get seasonal migrations of shorebirds and seasonal migrations of the Waterfowl is winter. We get spring migrations of the neotropical. So year round there are birds. There's different ones that are coming at different seasons, but year round we have hundreds of birds. If you come to Southwest Louisiana, you will see wildlife. I mean, there's no way that you cannot at least see a bird. It doesn't matter where you are, you at least see a bird in here. We have white ibis and glossy ibis and white-faced ibis. So we have two dark versions. The glossy and the white-faced are both dark ibis, and then we have white ibis. So you can see three types of ibis here. And they're a unique bird. You can see them feeding in mud flats in the outgoing tide, and they'll just be probing and putting those long curved bills down, and they're looking for invertebrates. Like the roseate spoonbills, they have the special unique bill. They're actually related to the ibis, which I learned here recently, and they feed by shoveling and filtering little invertebrates and food out of the water. And they have that specialized bill just for that, hence the spoonbill.
It's called Natchitoches, Louisiana. And of course, when you look at it, it looks like it should be Natchitoches. But it was an Indian name. And of course, our founder was a French-Canadian explorer. And we're not quite sure how they came about that spelling or that pronunciation. But we know we were occupied by the French, and then we were a Spanish territory. I'm sure they added their own little version to it over the course of the last 300 years. It's just been referred to as Natchitoches. And some people pronounce it Natchitoches, Natchitoches, you know, just, we don't care how you pronounce it. We just don't care. We want everybody to come here and just experience the Southern hospitality, and so however you want to say it's fine. When we were founded in 1714, this body of water was actually the Red River. And you can still see where the natural levees came through. This was as far north as our founder, Louis St. Denis, could actually go on the Red River because there was a major log jam. They called it the Great Raft. It stretched about 100 miles going up toward where Shreveport, Louisiana is now. But at that point in time in 1714, St. Denis got off here at what was then the Red River, and he established the French military presence that we know of as Fort St. Jean-Baptiste. But his doing that and establishing that fort site, leaving some French Marines here to guard it and some provisions, makes Natchitoches the oldest permanent European settlement in all of the Louisiana Purchase territory. This is what we call Front Street. The bricks that you see down here on Front Street were actually laid down right on top of the dirt paths that were here. They are over 100 years old, so these are the original bricks that were put down in 1903. We'll begin right here with the Cafe Frederick Mercantile Store, established in 1863. This wonderful mercantile store hasn't changed much since about the 1900s.
I'm Luke Frederick. We are in Cafe Frederick Hardware Store, Cafe Frederick General Mercantile. We've been operating on Front Street here in Natchitoches since 1863. Natchitoches is the oldest French settlement in the Louisiana Purchase, and we have the fortunate designation of being the oldest business in the oldest city. So we're very proud of that fact. As you look around, the interior is a 1930s interior. It was remodeled in 1932 in the midst of the Depression, in hopes that if the business survived the Depression, it would have the most modern facility to operate out of. It did survive, and through the late 30s, 40s, and 50s grew to be one of the largest department stores in North Louisiana. In 1920, my grandfather came into the store as a floor sweeper. He came in and was interested in the business. He was very little formal education, only had an 8th grade education, but was very savvy as far as street smarts and business smarts. So he teamed with the Caffey brothers, the second generation of Caffey cousins, I'm sorry, and they continued to grow the business. And the second cousin, Sidney Caffey, stayed, and my grandfather eventually became his business partner, working his way up through the ranks from floor sweeper to manager.
Luke's father moved into the business after serving in the Korean War, and after college, Luke, 23, followed, and now he and his wife run this remarkable store. In this time of large discount hardware and variety stores, Caffey Frederick is a real comment on how a small business can flourish and expand against such competition.
You do what you have to do to stay progressive, but at the same time, just preserve the ambience and preserve the nostalgic setting it's just here. It's not contrived. It's just, this is the way it was. This is the way it's going to remain. When we hear the comment when people walk in the door, I haven't seen a store like this in 70 years, and they're 90. You know, it's heartwarming, and it just provides encouragement for us not to go the route of the Walmarts and the Home Depots and the Ace Hardwares and the True Value Hardwares with the pretty slick, shiny stores. It's fun. It's fun to see the smile on people's faces. It's fun to realize that you help someone when they have a problem with their faucet. You make a difference in somebody's life, regardless of how small it is. When they're unable to help themselves, you can help them get something done, get something fixed, something that makes their life a little easier when it's working properly. That's just what we do, and we love it.
My dad started it, you know, he kind of revived the recipe, his own recipe, and he was a butcher next door, and he used to grind the meat and stuff for the ladies that made them in the homes. And it was hard for the public to get them, so he just kind of started doing his own recipe, and this is what he came out with, and we've been selling a lot of them. We've been doing it now for 37 years. This is what Natchitoches is known for. It's the meat pie consists of 80% beef and 20% pork, ground and seasoned, and then we put it in a crust. It's crimped, and then we deep fried. All of them are handmade. We make anywhere from 400 to 1,000 a day. We usually serve these up with dirty rice and a brown gravy that we make from scratch, or some people like to order it with our red beans and rice. We also serve them for breakfast.
We're at Avery Island, Louisiana, where my family has been producing Tabasco for the last 135 years. Tabasco was started by my great-great-grandfather, Edmund McElhenney, and Edmund started making the product and selling it in 1868, and we're still making the product the same way Edmund made it 135 years ago, right here in the same place.
The Tabasco name is synonymous with Louisiana and spicy food. A family-owned business for 5 generations, their Avery Island complex is an institution here.
We get somewhere between 150 and 200,000 people a year that'll come out to Avery Island and come see us. And some of them look at the Bird City and the Jungle Gardens, and some of them just come to see Tabasco and where Tabasco is made. So, but we get a lot of folks that come out here to see us, and we love to see them, and we appreciate the fact that they do make the trek out here to see us. So, we're not exactly sure why Avery Island produces such wonderful pepper, but it does. The soil, the environment, possibly something to do with the salt underneath us, makes a terrific soil for growing our hot peppers, and we produce very hot peppers here. So remember, we're an all-natural product, so we have no way to change the color. When Tabasco pepper grows out on a bush, the peppers, as they start to grow, first they turn yellow, then or green, and then yellow, orange, and then red, and bright red. And we can only use the brightest, reddest peppers for our product because that's going to control the color of our product also. But the pepper in a Tabasco pepper doesn't all come ripe together. The whole bush doesn't just blossom. So we have to go back and only pick the ripest pepper off the bush. And we keep picking, we'll normally pick for 2 to 3 months, going back through the same fields and only picking the ripest peppers. When we pick the pepper, we grind it up into a mash. And we take that mash and we put some salt in with the mash, and we put it in 50-gallon wooden whiskey barrels. We buy old whiskey barrels from the distilleries. We take the charring out of them that they use to char to make a dark color in the bourbon. We de-char the barrels. We have to replace the steel hoops on the barrels and use stainless steel because of the acidity of our product. And then we age the pepper mash in our warehouse for up to 3 years before we then open the barrels. We take the mash and we mix it with vinegar. And that is Tabasco. We drain the solids off of it, and we're left with a liquid that is, as most people say, very hot. So, we now ship to 160 countries throughout the world. We bottle in over 20 languages, and we're one of the most widely recognized food trademarks in the world, all from Avery Island, Louisiana.
The Jungle Gardens on Avery Island is the legacy of E.A., or Ned McElhenny.
He is credited by the Audubon Society with saving the snowy egret from extinction. He created the Jungle Gardens and the Bird City, which I think maybe you'll get to see while you're here. And he was a naturalist and a conservationist really before anybody really knew what those terms were. In the early part of the century, the snowy egret was being hunted to extinction for its feathers to make ladies' hats. The snowy egret has beautiful plumage, and they were very popular and very stylish. E.A. went out into the marshes around Avery Island, and he gathered 7 snowy egrets, and he built an aviary for them, and he let them hatch out their young, and let the young get to where they could fly, and then he let them go. From that original 7, now we get, we think, around 10,000 birds a year that come back and roost here to hatch out their young before they migrate again.
Just outside Crowley, the rice capital of the world in southwest Louisiana.
Crawfishing is pretty prominent in this part of the country, in the rice fields of South Louisiana, and also in the basin of Louisiana, which is swampy area. And we'll start crawfishing, we'll flood up the rice fields after we've harvested the rice in August. We'll let the vegetation grow back after we harvest the rice, and we'll start flooding the fields back up around the 1st of October. We do have rice, soybeans, and crawfish in this part of South Louisiana. And where we have rice this year, we'll have a crawfish crop after that, and then a soybean crop after that. So really you're getting 3 crops in 2 years. And then the next year, it'll go back to rice where you had soybeans. All worked off of a little 25 horsepower engine with several hydraulic motors on it to propel, propel the boat, and then the steering is also worked hydraulically, like a rudder on an airplane. You know, you want to turn to the right, you press the right rudder. You want to turn to the left, left rudder, and it's really that leaves your hands free to do picking up the traps, emptying them out, putting a new bait in and putting it down. It leaves your hands free. You don't steer with your hands. The crawfish will literally eat everything that's out here. If there's a lot of crawfish out here, they will eat all the vegetation, all the little fish, all the worms. You know, they'll just eat literally anything that's out here. They like certain things, they'll eat on that first, and then when that's gone, you know, they'll go to something else. But these fields, you can see all the vegetation out here. Come May or June, all you'll see is water, if you have crawfish. If you don't have any crawfish, naturally, that old vegetation will just stay, but eventually it'll rot in the water also, but then other vegetation will come. But the crawfish will literally eat everything that's out there.
Mardi Gras is a big celebration in Louisiana, lasting for a couple of weeks. Betty's RV Park in Abbeville is a perfect example of a local party.
I'll have to tell you, bring you back to 1980 and 81 in Louisiana for the setting. If you remember, 1981, we had a complete bust in the oil fields and the oil industry. And Louisiana was extremely hard hit by the depletion of the oil. So we were looking for things to do to supplement our income for the city. So we came up with the idea to purchase the Liberty Theater. So we decided to have a regular Saturday night show where we would afford the opportunity to have wonderful Cajun and Zydeco musicians, a place to play in a dignified setting with a good sound system, good acoustics, and have a sit-down audience who would actually sit down to listen to that music. Well, everybody thought I was crazy. First of all, for buying the old building, what would we do with that? And second, to think that people would come to little old town Eunice, Louisiana, to listen to Cajun musicians, especially in a place where no alcohol is served and no smoking was allowed. It was like a popcorn and Coke crowd. Well, it proved, thank God history has proven them wrong, because now who comes? Thousands of people from all over the world, and dignified people like you and other people who come to bring the message to the world about what's going on in this unique part of the United States, a French-speaking part of the United States, which is almost unheard of. And I guess we draw anywhere from 300 to 600 people every Saturday night from all over the world who come to listen to our musicians.
The mayor convinced the National Park Service to create a cultural center adjacent to the Liberty Theater. This was the silver bullet for this community's economic survival, and at the same time has become one of the leading forces in preserving and promoting Cajun music.
One of the things that people notice when they hear especially old-time Cajun music is that the singers sing way up at the high end of the range in a really straining, and that was not only to be heard over the crowd noise, it was part of the aesthetic. We as a culture appreciated singers who sounded like they were wailing, they were moaning, they were crying their stories. Cajun music is an expression of a people. I think this is not only true of Cajun music, it's true of anybody's music, really, but Cajun music is an expression of the people, and I think the best musicians were people who were playing music that was formed, that was informed by their everyday lives. I don't think they could have played that music if they hadn't been, walking behind a plow or welding or whatever else it was that they were doing. And I think it also expresses the collective psyche of an entire culture, and so I think that there's a collective blues in Cajun music. I think there's a collective soulfulness, a closeness to life, an intensity.
With renewed interest in Cajun culture, Mardi Gras in Eunice began to grow. Now the 15-mile run, as they call it, travels through the countryside. Over 3,000 participants, 1,200 of which are on horseback, carouse, entertain, dance, and generally have a great party.
You have to be very careful not to confuse Mardi Gras and Cajun culture. Mardi Gras is an exponent of Cajun culture, but it is designed to distort. It is specifically designed to intensify, to turn upside down, to turn inside out, to reverse roles. So, I've seen a lot of journalists come down to do a story on the Cajuns during Mardi Gras. It's a fun time to be here. And it's very easy to get fooled. Don't get fooled. Mardi Gras is a special thing. The next day, Ash Wednesday, all those people are in church getting ashes on their heads and going back to work and doing the other stuff that produces where this music comes from. Mardi Gras is one of those expressions of our social organization. Society was organized in little neighborhoods, and people ran Mardi Gras in their neighborhoods. The same people that people visit along the route are the people that would also show up at a community boucherie. They were the people who would also show up if your roof got blown off by a hurricane. They were the ones that show up to put it back up. These were your people. And so people ran Mardi Gras and still do run Mardi Gras in their communities. They're running it among their own. When does a mask fully function? When it's hiding the identity of someone who would otherwise recognize that person. So masks fully function only in a community where you would otherwise be recognized, and you put a mask on so you're not recognized, so that you can play a role, so that you can go and grab the homeowner's daughter and dance with her, or kiss the homeowner's wife. And the people a Mardi Gras visits are the ones that they're tagging, saying, you're one of us, you're one of us, you're one of us, you're one of us. And the way we celebrate Mardi Gras today is this begging procession, masked begging procession that goes to a house and performs a song and a dance, and they also perform improvised theater, just acting crazy and making the people on the porch laugh. What they're getting from the people is something to put in the gumbo, something of value. In the old days, it had even more value. You didn't give a chicken away very easily because eggs were money and chickens were food. So giving a chicken was a serious thing. In return for this very generous donation, what the Mardi Gras procession provided to the homeowner was a moment of hilarity in the otherwise dark, cold end of winter. A half-hour visit where everybody's laughing and feeling wonderful is worth a chicken. What do you think?